Actually, my story actually begins in Springfield, Ohio. And so, I was from Springfield, Ohio. My mother was pregnant with me at 16. I came into the world at 17 and, lived at home with my grandparents. And, in Springfield, lived at home with my grandparents. And my biological father wasn't in my life, very much. I think I saw him maybe 4 times in my life. And that's where my story begins in a 600 square foot house, living with my pawpaw, my granny, and my mother, and also a couple of my mother's older siblings were still there because she was still so young, and and went from Springfield, Ohio, to ultimately we moved to Dayton, and my mother married a man. He became my dad, Steve Williams, and it was a complicated relationship. He loved me greatly, but it was a complicated relationship. And, we lived in the city. And, the Dayton economy at that time, really flowed from the Detroit economy. It was referred to as the Little D. And all that came with the major metropolis and the small metropolis were the same, really, in terms of the economy being situated on the automotive industry, and also too all the social ills and challenges of the urban environment. And so as the economy crumbled in Detroit, the economy crumbled ultimately in Dayton. But during the time that I was there, it was when in the urban environment in the inner city, it's when drugs really began to move into all the neighborhoods. And I can remember my neighborhood eroding. And I say we lived in the hood, and it was, we say if there was the ghetto, it was like these two T's, and our house was right there in the middle, right? So it was a crack house on this corner, crack house on that corner, but a lot of love in the middle, and and in the neighborhood was a ton of kids, and I can remember being out and just playing in the neighborhood, and you start becoming competitive, right, based on just playing street ball, and and just being in the community. And I was that kid. I was that little rockhead kid running around. I was on my bike all the time, moving in different spaces. And I can remember when people in my neighborhood started getting really involved with, drugs, getting involved with the criminal element, getting involved with the shadow economy, as it were. And, I can remember that being all around me. And those were my boys, and those are the people that we rolled with and hung with. And at first it was small, and then over the time it was getting more and more major, and you knew you didn't want to get in certain cars at certain times of days and go into certain environments, even though when they came back home, that's my homie I've been knowing since I was in the second or third grade and lived across the street from me. And for me, life changed dramatically when I was 15 years old, and had a chance to go off to boarding school, and still was in Ohio, but moved from Southern Ohio in Dayton to Northeast Ohio in Hudson, Ohio, at West Reserve Academy, where I went to boarding school. And that was a defining moment in my life, truly, because I went from the inner city, went from the hood, went from the community, all nearly 100% black neighborhood. And, one of the things that people don't talk about enough in terms of, even race relations and what's going on in our country right now with the urban unrest across the country is, we live in hyper segregated communities, right? Meaning black folks go to school and live in communities with black folks. White folks go to school, live in communities with white folks. Latinx, Hispanic folks go to school, live in communities with themselves. So we live in this condition in this country of hyper segregation. So in some ways, the promise of desegregation, the promise of integration and integrating neighborhoods and communities is never really held true. And in my neighborhood, in the 70s and the 80s, was all black. And, that same neighborhood today, 30 years later, 40 years later, is all black. I mean, so, those things haven't shifted. And all we've seen is just this deepening of intergenerational poverty, deepening of intergenerational challenges. So when I went off to boarding school, coming from that neighborhood in that context, it was truly a different world. And, went into that environment. And it was an elite private school, boarding school. I was one of 8 African-American students at the school. And, you talk about what shapes you. Those are the types of things that shape me.